Hi everyone! Hello! Welcome back to the Carpenter Critique. I'm so excited to have you here. We are on episode 8 of, oh my gosh, so it's been 8 episodes, which means it's been 8 weeks. So I've been doing this podcast for 2 months now. I'm very happy, actually. I just checked, I try to stay off social media and stuff. I try to do the posts, but, I don't want to get obsessed with who's following and who, the count of everything. I'm trying to stay out of all that and just be grateful. But I did check today, and we are up to, I think it's 11 subscribers on YouTube and 13 on Spotify, which, I mean, I know that isn't a lot, but it's really cool that my podcast has only been going on for 8 weeks. And now that I have 11 of you that get those notifications when I post something, and some of you that have just stuck by me every episode, I'm so grateful for you here, to have you here. I'm so happy to just be sharing in this experience with you. And yes, please keep listening. Please keep engaging with the content. I just love having you here. And also, I know I haven't really opened this up too much, but I would love show recommendations that you think goes well with different psychological concepts, or if there's something that you want me to talk about, absolutely, I would love to analyze it or pair it with a show. Or if you give me a show, I'd love to pair it with an article. I'm down and open to suggestions. Please just hit me up or in the comments, let me know. I can't guarantee I'll do every request ever, but I can guarantee that I will look into it, and if it fits with the show, then it fits with the show. But yes, I'm so ready to encourage that discussion. And I would love to, even if it's not just an episode, it could be a discussion in the comments and we could talk about it. Please just let me know. I'm so happy today to be discussing Netflix's hit show Beef. For those who haven't seen it, it is a very intriguing anthology series. Much like The White Lotus, the cast is different every season, and they try to introduce a new concept around this, I guess. For those who aren't familiar with having beef or the term beef, to have beef with someone means that you're angry with someone, maybe you're in a tiff with someone, or I've got some beef with them, It's from the Urban Dictionary. But also, it's now become mainstream language, and I feel like it's been around long enough that most people should know what having beef with someone is. Or what's the beef? Miley, what's the beef? Miley, what's good? You know what I mean? Okay, so we're talking about Netflix's hit show Beef. The first series came out in 2023, and the second series just came out a couple weeks ago. So it's been 3 years since season 1. When season 1 first came out, I was in grad school, and it was a time in life where I was actually going through, I don't want to say a beef with someone, but I was fighting with someone who I was working with. Not fighting, but just actively disagreeing with. And every project that we were working on together, I was so angry, and I felt like I wasn't being treated right, as well as I just wanted that person to leave. They did, LOL. And then now I'm not in a beef, really. Honestly, I can't think of anyone that I'm in a beef with right now, which, I mean, sure, makes life less interesting, yeah, but also it is probably healthier. And I'm not actively seeking someone's downfall, so that's probably a good and healthy perspective to have. But yeah, so this show has come to me in different seasons of life, as it probably has a lot of you. And I think when I first saw it, it was such an interesting concept, because I think in Western society especially, there is not really a moral code for anger, or at least there's not really a lot of places for anger in society, especially even being seen as justified anger. People would still be like, well, you didn't need to be so angry, or there's no need to raise your voice, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of hush hush, and I think a lot of people don't share how they truly feel, especially in places like work, or if you have an emotionally repressed family, you won't really show your true emotions until they burst out of you. And so I thought this show was a really interesting concept, and I was really glad. It was so well done. The creator of the show is brilliant, and he deserves his flowers. I think Beef was up for an Emmy, and yeah, deservedly so. It's a very good show, and I love the concept. Also, there's a part of East Asian society that definitely represses and holds the feelings down, and so it was cool to see this East Asian representation for this show, and this type of show specifically, because with the culture kind of surrounding repressed emotions, and then that to be displayed on the screen was really, really interesting. And honestly, I thought very thoughtful. So without further ado, let's dive into beef. All right. So season 1 focuses on 2 main characters. Ali Wong and Steven Yeun are the people that are the actors that portray them. Their names are Amy Lau and Danny. I wanted to say Danny Zuko, but I know it's not his last name. Okay, but I would say Amy and Danny are the main characters. Amy is a successful businesswoman. She's looking to sell her business so she can be home with her husband and child. And she's like a multimillionaire CEO, business owner in California. Danny is on the flip side of it. So Danny is a contract construction worker who has just been fired from his job. He does have a little brother, and he has his cousins that he relies on quite frequently, but he's very financially not successful. His parents see him as a failure, and honestly, most of the people in his life don't really treat him with respect. That being said, in episode 1, we get into this road rage incident. It starts with a long honk from Amy, and then she flips off Danny. He doesn't know it's her, but he just follows the white van, and they get into this crazy road rage where they're following each other, they're trying to crash into each other, they're trying to cut each other off, blah, 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 blah. It's insane. And especially insane considering they're in like suburbia, California, and very pretty, very white picket fences. They literally drive through these patio plants or whatever to get to cut off Amy. It's very intense. But also, I mean, I thought it was just a dramatized version of the road rage that we see every day, especially in California. Hello, California drivers. I see you. I was one of you. So yeah, I relate as well. But the road rage is just the start of them each seeking revenge on each other. So they each memorize each other's license plate. They find where each other lives. They find where each other works. They start meeting people in each other's lives. They start terrorizing each other. It's a very fun and crazy show. In the end, though, spoiler alert for those who haven't watched. In the end of season 1, Amy and Danny end up in a car crash together, and they end up in the middle of nowhere and really talk out all their issues. By the end of the series, they do see each other as human and are actually, some could consider friends. She's with him in the hospital bed. So that's season 1. Season 2 focuses around 4 characters instead of 2. So it's more or less a battle of couples, starring Carey Mulligan, Kaylee Spaney, Oscar Isaac, and Charles Melton. Kaylee and Charles are in a relationship, as well as Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan are in a relationship. Oscar Isaac's character is the head manager of a country club, kind of giving White Lotus-y, but it's a country club instead of a hotel. Carey Mulligan is his longtime wife. They've been married for quite a bit. And Charles Melton and Kaylee Spaney are engaged and looking to start a family soon. They've only been dating for 2 years, though. The younger couple ends up walking in and seeing the older couple in a really intense fight and ends up videoing them. And that's kind of what starts off their whole beef, the couple's beef. Not only do the couples have beef with each other, but they have beef within the couples. So Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan are looking to get divorced, and Charles Melton and Kaylee Spaney, Charles is kind of having a wandering eye and meets another love interest. Kaylee Spaney is looking to get pregnant, but she has this, I think it's called a detersion. Oh my gosh, I forgot the word that they said, but this ovary defect where she has to lose one of her ovaries. And there is a class difference in both. Amy Lau in season 1, or Ali Wong's character, is very rich, just like Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan are. And then Danny in season 1 is very poor, just like Kaylee Spaney and Charles Melton. They're very much looking into the upper class as opposed to being a part of the upper class. I think that's almost crucial for a show like this. If we're going to be angry, you have to bring up, especially in America, the system and the wealth gap, because if you're not born into wealth, yeah, there's a lot to be angry about. Because the wealth gap is so big in America, it's definitely easy to compare, and I think a lot of the anger can stem from not being born rich or not being born into privilege. So many people are born with different opportunities than you, and with the explosion of social media, and honestly, even in a place where you're working like a server, such as Charles Melton and Kaylee Spaney, or even a construction worker, you're constantly being surrounded by the wealth that you don't have. And that can be very, very frustrating. And I think the older generation would consider Gen Z entitled, but Gen Z is constantly surrounded by the reminders of the wealth that some people have and that at least middle class Gen Z doesn't have, or lower class Gen Z, or honestly, most of Gen Z does not have. Also, excuse me, I do have a little bit of a sore throat, so I might be sipping my tea occasionally throughout this episode. So sorry about that. Let me just slurp in here a little ASMR. Oh, hot. Fuck, that was hot. Okay. Great. I'm not going to be able to feel my tongue for like 3 days. Okay, here we go. So the end of season 2 ends with Carey Mulligan finding another husband and Oscar Isaac. They do divorce, but Oscar Isaac ends up taking the blame for the company's downfall. And so he kind of lives or breathes by the company, and he ends up taking the blame for the company and serves time in prison for a couple years. Carey Mulligan goes off to marry a different man. And Kaylee Spaney and Charles Melton end up becoming the new Carey Mulligan and Oscar Isaac. So Kaylee Spaney takes Oscar Isaac's role at the country club, and Charles Melton serves as the husband for her. It's an interesting ending, but we're going to dive right into it, okay? I hate to compare, but also I do think it's worth comparing because I felt so affected by season 1. I thought there was such an interesting, fully complete story. And I do think season 2 is a fully complete story as well. But I think the season 1 ending justifies all of the rage and the anger, and it really brings you full circle, whereas season 2's ending doesn't make you disregard the anger, but it's less about the anger and more about the success, and I hate that. I hate that storyline that it was like getting to the successful point. I will say I really like both seasons. I think they're both psychologically very rich. The character performances are amazing. All 6 of the leads in both seasons are truly outstanding. It's some great East Asian representation throughout the cast, which Hollywood is definitely needing right now. And I think there's just some really interesting concepts being brought to light. I just think season 1 as a story, I really resonated with it more, and it packs more of a punch. Whereas season 2, though it's a really interesting story, it doesn't hit quite as hard as season 1 did. There was 10 episodes in season 1 focusing on 2 characters' lives, and season 2 has 8 episodes focusing on 4 characters' lives. Naturally, I felt like season 1 was a lot more fleshed out, and each of the characters' lives was dug into more. Not that season 2 wasn't, but we really got to know the season 1 characters. I just rewatched it again, as well as season 2, and I was just like, dang, like, they ate this up. Like, season 1 is so good. It's such a good story. And season 2 is a good story as well. It's just like, it's not like quite as hard of a hit. Also, season 1 came out in 2023, April of 2023, and that was during, at least in America, that was during Biden's election. Not that it was a more peaceful time. It was a little bit more peaceful. At least anger seemed a little less in the mainstream. And so I really resonated with like, oh, wow, there's not really a place to show a lot of anger, at least in my life. Like, I'm in school, I have 2 jobs, I have a lot of friends and family. There's very few people that have seen me angry in my life, and there's also just not a lot of places to show it. In 2026, I think anger is just more naturally mainstream than it was in 2023. Pop culture isn't the same as it was in 2023 naturally as it is in 2026, and so I think also the messaging packed a big punch in 2023, whereas now I think it did pack a punch, but a lot more about, I would say, the class conversation than it did about the anger conversation, which is less of a hit because this class stuff has been happening for so long. But anyway, performances are good throughout, and the writing is really, really good throughout. Season 1 is a lot more of these 2 characters reaching resolution. Amy is a lot more feeling invisible throughout the show, and she's dealing with a lot. She is a wife, she's a mother, she is a business owner, she's a CEO, but she's not truly feeling emotionally seen, and she feels that she can't show her emotions to anyone in her life. And so she's a very repressed individual. Whereas Danny is repressed, but in a different way. I think he's seeking more dignity. He's able to show his emotions to the people in his life, but he isn't respected by anyone. So he's craving that respect that Amy has, and she's craving the ability to show her emotions, even though he's still pretty repressed. Danny's able to show his emotions a little bit more naturally. In season 2, as opposed to having 2 different struggles from one side and the other, there's 4 different struggles really being shown. And though I think they're all valid and really interesting, it naturally spreads the narrative a bit more thin. I definitely cared more about season 1's characters than I did season 2's characters. And I also just felt like there was so much relatability in season 1 to like this emotional repression, or some people just aren't treating you fairly. And then in season 2, it's a lot more about arguing to be seen correctly Carey Mulligan's character, for example, she is a wife to a very successful businessman and country club owner, but she kind of feels that her internal life isn't being seen. So she's being seen for his accomplishments and what they do together as a couple, but no one's really interested in the internal side of her life. And she's like, are people really seeing the true me? And though that is a very important thing to be seen as, she's still being seen at the very least. Oscar Isaac, same thing. He has this idea of himself that he is this successful businessman. He works with all these big names. He's a guy's guy. He works with everybody. And he's being seen as that. That's not who he actually is. I think he has this inflated sense of himself, and he's getting frustrated that he's not being seen as the person that he thinks he is. And while that's a really interesting concept as well, I don't think it's quite as relatable as season 1, either of those arcs. But it is still good to think about, and naturally I would expect this great high-thinking show from Beef. I loved a few of my favorite lines, especially from season 2. I love when Carey Mulligan talks about how in the most successful relationships, couples fight. And there is going to be this breaking point, especially in a relationship that has no fights, that we all have light and darkness in our lives. And we all have light and darkness a part of our personality. The darkness has to come out somehow. And a lot of times the darkness goes towards the people that you love the most. But I would say at least the darkness is coming out. It's also like we do need to talk about it. Arguably, this whole show could be an argument for why we need to talk about how we're feeling. But the issue is that not all people are really good at talking about how they're feeling. Hence Beef in the fucking first place, to be honest. Or else this show wouldn't be as good as it is if it wasn't so core to humanity. Also, if I'm thinking, I really, really liked season 1's side characters as well. Season 1 had more effective side plots. Charles Melton falling in love with Eunice is her name. And the whole business lady side plot is good, but it kind of implodes on the show in the very end. And I kind of thought there was just like so many different distractions in season 2, whereas season 1 was a lot more of a focused narrative, and it still was chaotic, but it was very linear of a plot, whereas season 2 was a bunch of different lines that eventually came together, but when it came together, it was a ball of all these different plot lines, blah, 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 and then it crumbled, and then it formed its way back for the ending. But I don't know. Sorry, I've just liked season 1 a lot better. I still liked season 2, and I still think it's worth watching. Very good show. But season 1 also introduced this more human aspect to it. This anger was with people who are struggling spiritually. There's a whole God subplot where Danny goes into a church and just cries because he is so down on life. And I was like, ugh, so relatable. So it just brought you in, and even though these characters are frustrating, and even though these characters are hard to root for at times, they still are human, and they have this deep sadness. There was a lot less of that deep emotional portion and thinking about the deeper parts of life in season 2, and I think that's what really took me out of it sometimes was all 6 of these characters are hard to root for. All of them struggle with this anger, they struggle with expressing their emotions, but at least in season 1, there was these anchors that tied you down. Amy is a mom, and she really, really genuinely cares about her kid, and she wants to do right by her kid. It just comes off wrong in a few different circumstances. Carey Mulligan and Oscar Isaac did love each other in season 2. I really do think they do. They don't do much to show it, and they also don't do much to really keep their marriage. And same with, I would say, arguably, Kaylee Spaney and Charles Melton had a really good connection. I think that was trying to be portrayed in season 2, that they had a good connection, but we didn't see enough of it to really keep rooting for them to stay together. Honestly, Charles Melton, you should go to Eunice. Like, she seems like a way better fit for you than Kaylee. Like, you seem to get your validation from her than from your own girlfriend, so, like, why are you still with her? Even though it was good, I felt like the characters were a lot less human than the ones in season 1, and it, like, immediately would detach me from the story, whereas season 1, it kind of just hooks you and, like, keeps hooking you over and over again, and just when you're about to stop rooting for them, they do something and you're like, okay, I still want you to end up happy in the end. But season 2, by the end, I'm like, all right, fuck you, you can die, eat shit, over you. Like, the only one that I was diehard, I was like, Eunice, you better make it out of this bitch. Come on, Eunice, you better go, girl. Hopefully her name's Eunice. If I'm mispronouncing her name, or if I'm like saying it wrong or something else. But no, I really liked her character. Maybe the businesswoman, but then again, it's like they introduced this side character in season 2, and she's a part of it. and we get to know a little bit about her, but not enough to be, I hope it works out for you, girl. That would be my analysis of the first 2 seasons. I think both are great. I honestly think it's a really good show, and I really want a season 3. Keep giving us more. I want more beef. More beef. More beef tenderloin for the table, please. I hope they go back to 1v1. I really liked that style of storytelling instead of the couples versus the couples. Also, I'm just like, can we all just be single? I don't know. Does any marriage ever work? Why are they all not working? Why are they all breaking up? Give me a happy couple or give me single. I just want to see some single people in this, you know? I don't know. But anyway, let's dive right into the psychology article. I'm ready. For this week's psychology article, I chose The Moral Psychological Justification of Anger, an exploration of self-respect and recognition. This was done from the School of Humanities in Southeast University in Ninjing, China. So the authors are, forgive me for the pronunciation, I did look it up, but I just know I'm going to butcher it. Jinjin Zhang, Zhiheng Xiong, Xiangzhen, and Xiaochen Ma. Once again, so sorry for the pronunciation. I really did look it up. I'm just genuinely horrible at saying words. But this article is absolutely brilliant. I'm going to tag them below, and I'm going to include the link because, oh my gosh, I love this article. Also, it's an East Asian psychology study done for an East Asian TV show creator. So, you know what? If we're going to go representation, we're going to go fucking hard, bitch. So, yes, let's get some East Asian psychology representation in here, baby. All right, so the core aim for this study was that this paper argues that anger should not be judged by mainly its outcomes, good versus bad, but by its underlying moral and psychological basis of anger, especially the need for recognition and self-respect. So the thing about this study is that usually in my psychology studies that I pick, it's testing something or it's manipulating a variable to see the outcome and the result of this socially or psychologically manipulated variable. With this study, it's actually just an analysis of a bunch of different psychological literature over time about the emotion of anger and what we can deduce from this philosophically. So it's more of a philosophical paper and an analysis of previous research and the concepts that we can take from it as opposed to its own study. What's also cool about this is it's these previously established concepts that we've already seen about anger. So we're not testing anything with this study and we're not trying something new. We're taking new concepts from previous research, which is definitely grounds for talking about. Like there's so many things established within the world of psychology that, yeah, sometimes we don't need to test. Sometimes we just need to really resonate with what's already been said and take some further findings and see what we can do with the findings that we already have. So this was a very good paper. I really, really enjoyed reading it. But in order to understand this paper, we have to understand what was previously said about anger in other psychology studies. So a lot of the literature about anger in psychology is either pro or against. The anti-anger view is arguing that anger is just irrational and destructive. A lot of the previous research would suggest that anger focuses on revenge, on random escalation, and it claims that anger really undermines human progress. But the pro-anger view was that anger can motivate justice and social change. It should be judged based on the outcomes of your anger, so that anger can be justified as long as you're moving in the direction of social change and justice or equality. Which neither of those opinions are, we don't want to say they're wrong, but I think we can dive a little bit deeper into the emotion of anger because, like it or not, for better or worse, humans have it, and it's a part of our emotional range. So is there a point to it? Is there a point to being angry? Is there justification in it? I think we should keep reading, shall we? So these authors, their core shift is that they propose anger should be understood as a response to recognition failure, not just as a reaction to harm. So this reframes anger as more of a moral signal. So am I not being recognized or am I not being seen equally? And my anger is stemming from that. So not only are they reframing anger as this like moral signal, but they're reframing anger as a psychological response to identity or dignity, which is really, really interesting. Their conceptual approach was they were thinking of moral philosophy and the psychological theories around the emotion of anger and the social theories of recognition and dignity. This conceptual breakdown is cognitive, so how do we interpret events. Moral, what do we think is fair and unfair? And social, how do we treat others? And how do others treat us? All of this distinction building, we're able to have two camps. So we're able to have justified anger and unjustified anger. Okay, so this is the central thesis of the paper is humans' need for recognition. Humans have this fundamental need to be seen as equal and to be treated fairly as well as other people. So a lot of times when people get angry, and in history, anger tends to stem from people being treated unfairly or people seeing themselves as being treated unfairly and wanting moral justification for that. This is where the article distincts two different sides. So there's self-respect and self-esteem. Self-respect means being treated as an equal human. I'm being treated fairly. I'm being treated just like everybody else. Self-esteem is more about personal status and comparison and ego. How do I deserve to be treated? The paper argues that moral anger will come from self-respect, and immoral anger is going to talk about ego and status. And you have to keep this in mind because I think the reason that Beef Season 1 starts and ends so well is because it's really dealing with this fact of self-respect. And I would say Beef Season 2 is really dealing more with the fact of self-esteem. So that's why I picked this article in the first place. Was that pretty big brain of me? I think it was. But we're going to keep going. Okay, so some core findings was that the trigger for justified anger is the lack of fair recognition. So if I don't see someone being treated as fairly, if I don't see myself being treated as fairly, then that will trigger this justified anger. The root to this justified anger is that someone is treating someone without dignity, without respect, and this signals injustice in your brain, and then you get angry. But this also motivates you to a corrective action, so this motivates you to be wanting a good outcome in the first place. So you're wanting this justice in the end. The immoral anger, the trigger is an ego threat. Your trigger is your feeling of superiority is being threatened. The root of this, of course, is an inflated self-view. So I'm thinking of myself maybe as larger than I am. And if someone's stepping on my toes a little bit, they shouldn't be doing that. And I'm going to get a little angry. A lot of the function of unjustified anger is to be seen as dominant and to be seen as in charge and also to be the one running the show, basically. And the moral status of this, no question, is problematic. Whereas justified anger is seen as an outcome for corrective action. The unjustified anger is their end goal is more like, I still want to be the big dog on top, or I don't want my ego to be threatened at all. Which, sure, there are some cases where I would probably say it's justified, but there's a lot of cases like that, very unjustified. And contrary to many theories, this paper doesn't argue that anger is about revenge. In fact, most anger is about being acknowledged, not being seen, and restoring moral balance to the world. Think about the last time you've been angry. What was it about, and what was the purpose of the anger? Do you think you were looking towards justice? Were you just angry? Were you thinking of yourself maybe being treated unfairly or someone close to you being treated unfairly? What triggered the anger? And it's good to think about these things. Is this anger I'm feeling justified? Is this feeling justified? Or is this feeling actually just some misplaced resentment? Or is there something else going on? That's a good way to look inward. A little scary, but a good way to look inward nonetheless. And just like I was saying, the authors argue anger as a moral signal. So is something unjust happening and something immoral happening? I want to be paying attention to these things. And I want my soul to be in check. I want to be knowing that I still crave justice and I still want everybody to be treated equally. And if we're not, let's think about that. Why do you want everyone to be treated unequally? You know, just some food for thought there. Do we want equal rights? I think we do. Or we should. But regardless, this paper doesn't frame anger as good or bad, which I really enjoy, but informational and morally meaningful. So anger has meaning and anger can have justice, but it depends on what the trigger for the anger was. And so this is where we bridge a gap between psychology and philosophy. So psychology focuses on human emotions and it focuses on the human brain. Why does my brain think like this? Why am I feeling like this? What is triggering this? And philosophy focuses on moral justification. So is this just in the world? Is this right? Is this equal to happen to everybody? Is this fair? And so this paper connects them by showing that emotional experience is morally structured. Anger is a moral emotion. It can be moral and it can be very immoral, but also moral judgment is very psychological. psychologically grounded. So are these feelings connected? And if so, why? And what is the outcome that I'm looking to seek with all of these emotions? So instead of asking, is anger good or bad? Let's ask, what kind of recognition am I being demanded, or what kind of recognition is being demanded here? Is that just such a great article? I don't know. I'm like in love. I really, really enjoyed it. And also, I don't think we talk about anger enough. I feel like it's a very unexplored emotion. And it's a very common emotion, but we don't share about it. I mean, I'm also not super angry as a person. Sometimes I'm like the Tyra Banks, we were all rooting for you, and she's so angry. I'm like, I've never like had that feeling in my entire life. I've definitely been angry, but I don't think I've ever yelled at someone that intensely. And I don't know, sometimes I'm like, I wish if I was just a little bit more dramatic, I need a little bit more anger here. Because really, I'm just, well, all right, let's move on. Like I need to, sometimes, okay, Luke, let's get a little bit angrier. So after reading through the article and seeing anger as this moral signal of like what's not being respected, what's not being recognized here, let's apply this to beef. The core theory from the article is that anger isn't just impulsive, destructive, or revenge-driven. It's a response to failed recognition. So I'm not being recognized, and I'm getting angry about it. Why? It's like, you didn't see me, you didn't respect me, I don't exist to you as an equal. So now I'm angry. And the key split is there's this justified anger rooted in what we say earlier, self-respect, So the justified anger is rooted in self-respect, whereas the unjustified anger is rooted in self-esteem. Ooh, got to burp. No, all good. Just kidding. Had to burp. Ooh, I think that was it. Yeah, that was it. Okay, so let's talk about season 1. Amy Lau, or Ali Wong's character, is very wealthy, she's very controlled, she is very also emotionally repressed. She's got a lot of trauma in the back, but she's not going to let it be seen by the light of day. She feels very unseen in her marriage, and she feels also very reduced to her roles. So she's a wife, a businesswoman, a CEO, and a mother. But she feels that she is more than that, and she feels she isn't being seen outside of the roles. I would say that's very justified anger. So she starts off in a very justified anger spot. Just as well, we also have Danny with a very justified anger. He is very financially unstable. He's got some peer pressure from his family to be performing better than he is. He feels like a chronic failure, but he also feels invisible socially. So they're both dealing with these feelings of being invisible and not being truly seen by the people that love them the most, or the people that they love the most. And so I would argue that both Amy and Danny start off with this very justified anger. And Amy's big question is that she has status, but she doesn't have authentic acknowledgement. Like, people aren't seeing her for who she truly is. Danny, on the other hand, he says, I matter, and no one is treating me like I matter. Both of these things very justified to be angry about. And I think that's what makes season 1 so compelling, is that, yeah, I see these characters and I see that they are angry, and rightfully so. That would be really hard situations to deal with. The road rage incident happens, and it's kind of like, no, is that really the best way to express our anger? I mean, it makes for very entertaining television, hence all of us being enthralled, but it's probably not the best way to deal with your anger. The road rage incident isn't just about driving, and it isn't even just about anger. Neither Amy or Danny is really seeing each other as human. They're just seeing each other as a bump in each other's road, and then the anger festers, and then they start terrorizing one another. Then the anger becomes morally unjust, is because they're actually not treating each other with the fairness or equality that human beings deserve to be treated with. And so each one sees each other as an obstacle rather than a person. And from the research paper's lens, this is where the moral injustice comes in. So when it comes to self-esteem issue as opposed to a self-respect issue. But that's literally the structure of brief. There's the initial slight, and then they each retaliate in their own way. Then they have a misinterpretation of each other, and so they're thinking that each other is actually hateful towards the other one, and both of them escalate, and then there's threats to, this is not who I am, this is not me, I'm not being seen. boom, this escalation into the very end. They finally see each other for human beings at the very end after they're stuck together in the middle of nowhere to work out their issues for about 48 hours by themselves. What I really, really enjoy about season 1 is that the initial road rage incident, they're not seeing each other as humans, and it causes all this anger and this beef. And then the resolution to it is that they do see each other as human. And I would say there's a lot of love for each other in the very end because they're truly able to see each other's stories and have empathy for one another and where they're at in life. It was a very full circle thing. And season 1 of Beef is really, really psychologically rich, like I've said before, just because it fully encapsulates truly having empathy for someone, but also truly being angry with someone and all of this misinterpretation. It is justified anger until it's not. And it goes through the entire cycle of anger, which it was just really, really well done. And so I loved that season 1 of Beef just also rings psychologically true. And though they're probably worse off in life for it, they do eventually get what they want, which is to be seen and to have dignity for one another, which is a really great resolution. I would say season 2 is the flip. So it starts off as this self-esteem issue. No one is being seen for how they want to be seen. Carey Mulligan is being seen as this wife and supporter, and she's not being seen for who she truly is, which is kind of like Amy Lau in season 1, but there is just this difference of her being seen as more in her marriage. Whereas Amy Lau, all of her trauma is being repressed. Carey Mulligan is just having, I would say, more insecurity issues and ego issues, which though it's very relevant, it's just less compelling than repressed trauma. But she also is attached to this husband who is very big on ego, and he is feeling that he's not being seen for how he wants to be seen either, which is this like go-to guy. He can solve all the problems, but he can't. In season 1, it's a lot more about this self-respect anger, like I'm not being treated as an equal, whereas season 2 is a lot more about this ego status anger, whereas like my identity or status is being threatened, which is also very interesting. But I would say that's probably why the fighting isn't as intense. Like in season 1, they're really going at it, and it's like he ends up robbing her house and like injuring her mother-in-law. In season 2, they're kind of trying to pull off a heist, but then it ends up not working and Oscar Isaac goes to jail. So it's not that it's not elevated, it's just also there's not really these, other than episode 1, there's not this intense fight. I'd say the best episode of season 1 is the end, and so it's all this culmination to the very end. The last episode is the best of the series, I would say, by far. And then of season 2, I would say episode 1 is the best one. And so after this peak, it kind of just like goes down a little bit. Not that like the biggest fight is in episode 1, and there's all the good character building, and not that there isn't in the rest of the season, but definitely the best of it is in episode 1. And so with season 1 being all this build up into the great episode at the end, it's a little bit, not a less decline in quality, but it just feels a lot different when season 2 starts with the best and then kind of just like do. It's still good, but the episode 1 I thought was the best. Also with season 2, we have this 4-character system, and I like that each character is dealing with something, but it also spreads the plot very thin. So Oscar Isaac is this character of high status, and he has this ego-based anger that's disguised as moral outrage. So he feels like I'm being disrespected in my marriage and in my job, but what actually is happening is he's losing control on how he's being perceived. And so it's a lot of this unjustified anger because it's a threat to his status. And the root of this is this recognition. He's not being recognized for how he's wanting to be, and it's not a deprivation issue like he thinks it is. Carey Mulligan's character is a woman struggling with aging and her appearance. She's 39 or she's 40, but she claims that she's 39. She's looking to get all this surgery. She's socially being seen, but she's not being understood. She feels like she's performing this role, but her internal life is being ignored. And so her anger is all about no one actually sees me, but what actually it evolves into is I'll force you to see me. So by the end, she's doing all this crazy stuff. Like she wipes this poop on the glass that she gives to Kaylee Spaney's character. Ugh, oh my gosh, that scene made me want to throw up. It's still intense, but it's more or less behind your back fighting, whereas season 1 was like in your face fighting, and season 2 is a lot more like conniving to see how far I can get up the social ladder. So I would say that Carey Mulligan's character really does start as justified anger, and it kind of devolves and transforms into this unjustified anger, like, I will be seen no matter what. I think it was a little bit similar to Amy's character in season 1, but I think it had a way worse payoff than season 1 did, basically. Charles Melton is a really interesting case because he's young and he doesn't have this established ego or identity, but he definitely wants the status. And he's kind of a social climber throughout. Like, he's not getting this validation from his girlfriend and as a proper physical therapist, but he's starting to get validation from other people. And he's like, I deserve this. I deserve this. He's a very in-between because it's not that he doesn't deserve it, but I would say an argument could be made that he hasn't put in the work to deserve it. He forges his own master's degree, which I'm like, well, it's probably not great, but also you probably deserve to have a little bit more money and have access to good health care, like we all do, and the system is broken, but the attempts that he does to get it are maybe unjustified. So it's a very, like, morally weird character. He was also probably my least favorite. I like Charles Melton. I think he did a good job playing, but his character itself would probably be my least favorite of the main 6. He feels that he deserves more than what he's getting, but whether that's true or not in the series, it leaves it very ambiguous. It blames the system for his position, but he also hasn't, like, gone to schools. I don't know. I'm kind of like, does he deserve this or does he not? I do think he shouldn't be excluded from the benefits of, like, good healthcare and, like, access to good resources, but also everybody is facing that. So just because you're seeing the wealthy people access it doesn't mean that you're justified and just doing whatever you can to get there. I don't know. So it's an interesting case study and, like, moral justification or not for his character. I would say the character that I most rooted for was Kaylee Spaney's character because she's more of an observer than anything, but she probably had the worst payoff. Season 2 has me all types of messed up. I think they did something really interesting with her character where she's the youngest of the main cast, and so she's not really attached to an identity or an ego, and she's still kind of forming what her ego looks like. And that's why she doesn't get angry until the very end, because she doesn't really know if she's being fucked over or not until the middle of the series, when she's seeing that all these wealthy people have access to what she wants. She wants to be able to have the IVF treatments. She wants to be able to be married and be with her Charles Melton man. She's a lot younger and more impressionable. She's learning where she stands morally. She's trying to get clues from all the other women in the club, but also she does stand her ground against Oscar Isaac, which I think was really cool. But then she kind of just keeps doing all these, like, morally not great things, and I'm like, oh, girl. So her anger is a lot more what counts as disrespect to me, and she's learning what counts as disrespect to my ego, and how do I respond to it. But what really ends up showing is she just learns how to be angry, and it's really shaping her socially throughout the rest of the season. But I would say she starts off morally probably the best, and then at the end, she's maybe one of the worst moral characters of the show because she's just willing to do whatever she can to get further. And while that's compelling television to watch, not a great person to be around in real life, let me just say. And so I would say each of the characters in season 2 demands a specific type of recognition. Oscar Isaac is demanding status recognition. He wants recognition for everything he's done, for his wife, for the club. Carey Mulligan is demanding emotional recognition. Charles Melton's character is demanding this aspirational recognition. So I've been working towards this my entire life. I need to be recognized for it. And then Kaylee Spaney is finding her recognition. So she seeks this foundation of an ego and an identity, and she's wondering where to put it. Is it in this wealthy class? Is it in this middle working class? Is it with her husband? Though I think all characters do have this full circle in the end, Charles Melton does end up getting the validation he wants because he ends up marrying Kaylee Spaney, and they have a kid, so he gets that validation from her. She also gets this truly foundational recognition because she is identifying with the wealthy class and becomes part of it. Carey Mulligan gets her recognition because she goes off and finds a new husband. And Oscar Isaac ends up in prison away from his wife, but he does own up to the things that he does, so he's truly being seen for what he did and how he's acted. So they all do get their recognition in the end, but it's just extremely less satisfying because season 1 was like this explosion of empathy and I see you as a human person again. And so it was like a full circle moment and ends on a really sweet note. Whereas season 2, it is full circle and each character story is complete in the end, but it's more or less like they get the success and not like embracing the humanity. I thought season 1's ending was so human, and season 2's ending was just kind of like, I get to be seen the way I want to be seen. And I just think that's far less compelling of a storyline in general. But I mean, credit to the writers, like, it is a full story, and it's like a well-written circle, basically. Like, they all go in a loop. Each character is like resolved in a good way. Like, it's kind of like that White Lotus thing where they end up choosing capitalism and success and their own money. I like the end of season 3 that leaves the viewers not uninterested, but just kind of unsatisfied. And season 1's ending was so satisfying. So I think I'm just a little bit upset about the ending. Okay. So when comparing the 2 seasons psychologically, season 1 of Beef is the same wound of feeling invisible, but it's reflected in different lives with different class scenarios. And season 2 is a bunch of different runes, or all 4 different runes, but they're all in the same space, so in the same life regardless. And the result is this chronic misalignment, and everybody's not being seen the way they want to be seen. And in the end, that's resolved. And same in the end of season 1, that's resolved. But in season 1, it's resolved in empathy, whereas season 2 is resolved in being seen the way that they want to be seen. So it is a complete story. It's very good. I would say season 1 had a better emotional payoff, and that's why I prefer it. But I'm excited to see season 3, and I think everybody should read the awesome article from Southeast University in Ninjing, China. Honestly, it was so amazing. I loved this article, and I loved Beef. Both seasons, I would definitely recommend to people. I would recommend season 1, but I do love both. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's listening. I'm so grateful to continue keep doing this and to have an audience. And so thank you for listening. Thank you for engaging in the content. If you want to follow me on any social media, I am at the Carpenter Critique, and on X, I'm Carpenter Critic. If you want to watch, this full video is available on Spotify and YouTube. And if you just want to listen, it's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. And if you want to check out our website, it's www.thecarpentercritique.com. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good one. Bye!